Hi guys, welcome to this youth workshop. I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes until everyone settles down and see if we get a couple last minute join. So I'll wait until 3:05. Okay, so it seems like it doesn't look like there's that many people joining, but just a show of hands, how many of you are here right now? Can I get a hi in the chat or like a hand raise? Okay. Hi Jacob, hi Taylor. All right, so today's session is a pretty long one, so I'm gonna get started so that we have time to go through it all. So today's workshop is about part-time opportunities, including resume, cover letter, and interview preparations. So first off, I'd like to introduce who we are. So we are York Region Educational Services. We're a nonprofit organization offering free language and STEAM programs for kids and teens and seniors. We also have summer camp for children's age 5 to 12 that we offer every summer. And as for me, I am a third year specialist psychology student at U of T. I am a linguistics minor and I love studying the human mind and spreading knowledge. So that's a bit about me. Now we'll go ahead and get started. So just to start us off, can I get a raise of hands of, who has a part-time job or who might be looking for a part-time job in the summer or the near future? Okay, so Jacob. So I assume you guys are all here because you're interested in finding a part-time job sooner or later. Um, but yeah, hope you guys keep this in mind. So for today's agenda, we're going to talk about part-time opportunities, their importance, and why we have these, why we take part-time jobs. Then we're gonna look at how to build a good resume, how to build a good cover letter, and then later we're going to talk about interview preparations if we have time. Okay, so topic one is part-time opportunities. So the importance of part-time opportunities differs in high school versus university. In high school, you sort of are in that phase where you're gaining experiences and developing transferable skills for the future. It's also a good time for you guys to make connections with whether it's your teachers or with certain employers that can vouch for you in the future. Now, in university, you can take part-time jobs as like a way to alleviate financial stress. You can also strengthen your skills that you've developed in high school, and you can almost always demonstrate initiative and responsibility to your future employers that will see that, oh, you took a part-time job while studying during university. So it's a really good way to demonstrate initiative in that way. So you might be wondering, where can you find a part-time job? So there's actually a couple of ways. The first very big one is word of mouth. So if your friend or family friend is hiring, That's most likely, that's one of the most like big options of finding a part-time job because one, you're reliable, two, you have the connections. So yeah, that's the big one. And then for the kind of more broad part-time job opportunities, you can find it on LinkedIn, Indeed.com, things like Glassdoor. You can also find part-time jobs at job fairs, like at your university or high school. Sometimes they have that as like a big event. Now, for me, I do have, because I go to UFT, I do have a portal where I can look for part-time jobs. Every school should have this. Once you're in university, you can look at sort of the part-time jobs that are available only for you as a university student. So yeah, those are the options. So now we're gonna, dive into how to build a good resume. If you don't already, you can probably right now pull up a resume if you have one, and go through it with me while I'm giving you guys some tips on how to format a good resume, or else you can just take some notes and then use it, refer to it in the future. So, can I get sort of an idea of who has or hasn't made a resume before? So if you do have a resume, could you raise up your hand? Okay, so Jacob has a resume. Anyone else? Okay, so it seems like only Jacob has. That's fine. We're all here to learn. So, first off, why do we need a resume? Resumes are for employers to review and decide if they think you are qualified for a job before they meet you. And a good and polished resume can really help you secure an interview because it leaves a lasting impression. The resume tells your employer your academic achievements or awards, your skills and experiences, and how well you fit the role. So a very important thing about building a good resume is to demonstrate that you have the skills and capabilities fit for the job. You also, in your resume, based on how clearly you can write, you can demonstrate your communication skills and your professionality. And just a tip, hiring managers usually take about 7 seconds to scan your full resume. So if it's too wordy or if there's too much going on, then they might not even look at it. So you really have to worry about at the very top in big letters. And then the second chunk would be your summary of skills and qualifications. And then you should go on to list your educational level. And then under that, you'll put work experience. And then if you don't have too many that are relevant, you can put volunteer experience as well. You can, if you want to, you can also put relevant projects or publications, awards that really demonstrate that you are a good candidate. So first off, let's talk about name/contact info. In this section, you should have your name at the very top and then your phone number if you're comfortable with disclosing that. You need an email, profession preferably a professional email, so not like some email you made in grade 2. And if you do have a LinkedIn profile that's really presentable, you can put that in that section as well. And if you're more technical, say you do engineering or like CS, you can link your e-portfolio or website that you've worked on if it's relevant. Then we move on to the skill summary part. And this is sort of a really broad summary of your skills, laying out what makes you a good candidate for the position. It should only be around 3 to 5 points so that you don't overwhelm the hiring employer, the hiring manager, sorry, because then it would seem like you're taking up this whole chunk just to summarize your skills and not talking about your relevant experiences. So in the skill summary, that's what your hiring manager would look at first. So you have to make sure it's specific to the job. So you tailor it to the specific qualifications that they're looking for. And then one tip I have for this is that you should be quantifying your experiences. So instead of saying like strong experience in Python, you can say like 2 years of coding experience in Python. Now, 2 years is gonna kind of give a stronger impression than just saying strong. So yeah, keep that in mind to use numbers when you're quantifying your experience. So this is a little example. You can take a look at this. This is a pretty solid beginning to your resume where you have the name and contact info on the top, and then a quick little blurb of your qualifications. And then here, education is the next chunk. So after your name, contact info, and then your skill summary, you're gonna put your education. So education is really important. You only want to list your most recent, to put your high school stuff in there. If you're in high school, though, just put your high school, your expected graduation date, your grade average if it's outstanding, and any awards that you have won. So it could be like academic awards or sports awards, things like that. And any relevant courses, such as coding courses or like clubs that you've joined, things like that, you can put that in there. So for example, it would look something like this. So it would say education, your high school, your expected graduation, and then sort of your achievements at the bottom. So far we talked about name and contact info, some skills of summary, skill summary, your education. So now we get into like the meaty part. Now we talk about experience. So this is where you list all of your most relevant experiences fitting for the job that you're applying for. So the formatting is pretty important. You want it to look pristine so that it's not too messy and hard to look at. So you should probably bold your position title and then either have at least 3 points per experience demonstrating what you did, or have like two, but make it 2 sentences so that it doesn't look like you only did a little bit, or it doesn't look like you did too much. So after that, you're going to put your duration of work. So whether it's 4 months, 8 months, a year, and that just gives the hiring manager an idea of how long you worked at that position. And again, the points should be no longer than 1 to 2 lines. So knowing how to format this is really important, because ideally your resume should only be around 1 page. It's different if you're in sort of more STEM areas like engineering and CS, where your resume could be 2 pages to demonstrate kind of all your projects and your involvement. But ideally, your resume is only 1 page because, again, the hiring manager won't take too long looking at every detail of your resume. So this is in the experience section. You're going to sort of follow this format. This is a really good format because it gets straight to the point with everything that you want to talk about or tell the hiring manager. So this is called the SER format. First, you're going to start off with a strong action word, and then you're going to talk about experience, which is what you did, and then you're going to talk about the result, so the impact that you made. So here's an example. Created and prepared weekly and monthly status information. So in this, you can see 3 chunks: created and prepared. So that's your action word. And then you'll have weekly and monthly status reports, which is what you did. And then the last chunk is ensuring that clients consistently receive timely and complete information. So that's the impact of your actions. So within your experience points, you should follow this format to really tell the hiring manager what you did and the impact of that. And again, remember to quantify when possible and add adjectives like quickly or efficiently doing what you did. So here's what that looks like, right? In your experiences section, you're gonna put your title and then where you did it from, how long you did it for, and then sort of subsections of what you're employed as. And then your little blurb should be following the same skill, experience, and result format so that it isn't too overwhelming. So this is a checklist for your formatting. So you can take notes right here. It's just bold position title, at least 3 points per experience, duration of work, and then points are no longer than 1 to 2 lines. So up until now, do we have any questions about what we went over for resumes? I know some of you came in late, so if you want me to go over something that we've already went through, feel free to say so. Okay, if we're all good, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on to what makes a good resume. So we just covered the elements of a resume. Now we're gonna cover how to make it look nice. So this is a bad resume example. Can you guys like point out some of the weaknesses of this resume just in the chat? So I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to do that and really point out like see how much you guys know about what a resume should look like and how this does not tailor to that. Okay, so yep. So here, the first big thing is that the skill summary does not showcase any skill development. It just says a creative and visionary student with a track record of working in teams and delivering works of quality. I am passionate about design. So it doesn't talk about kind of the to be professional. There are too many colors, pink, peach, green, yellow. So these are bad things to put on your resume. And then here in education, they put elementary school. So that is a big no-no. You don't need to put elementary school in your resume. And they didn't even put sort of their involvement in school. So they kind of just listed the high school, elementary school, but no sense of how they did. And then in their experiences, first off, it's formatted really weirdly. And then they didn't explain their contributions or achievements in a meaningful way. And also, it's not in chronological order. You should always have the most recent experience at the top. And then for the skills section, they used skills bars, and graphics, colors, which isn't really like a good way to measure. You should be saying how long you did it for, like 2 years of experience, 3 years of experience, things like that, instead of using these progress bars. So overall, this is a bad resume. And here we can see sort of a better resume. So here is everything's consistent. They're using one font and also one font size throughout the whole resume. And it's very clean to look at. And it's sectioned off using these kind of dividers and headers that says summary of qualifications, education, experiences, etc. So this is a lot to read. Just know that it's kind of, you want everything to flow together. So after summary, you talk about education, and under education, you should have all of these things that we talked about already. And under experiences, you should have, at least 2 to 3 experiences. If you don't have enough, you can always talk about your volunteering experience, which is at the bottom. And yeah, just make sure things are consistent throughout your resume, whether it's font or font size, whether you're bolding consistently, just to make it easier to read. So this is an example resume. Um, it's an okay resume, but there are points of improvement for this resume, especially for the experience section. They only have one experience, which is okay, but again, they only put one experience point, which demonstrates that they didn't do much in that experience. So at least work a position just to show that you did more than just one thing. Okay, so now we're gonna cover cover letters and how you can build a good cover letter. So does anyone actually have experience writing a cover letter? Like, do you have one that you've written before? Um, yeah, so Jacob has. I know in middle school, I think it was, I took a course where I had to write a resume and a cover letter, but by the time I got around to using it, it was kind of university already, so a lot of the stuff was outdated. It was for a volunteering position. Oh, mm. So can I just ask Jacob, like, what grade you're in right now? Grade 9. Okay. Grade 9 is a good start. The only thing I would mention to you is that you should constantly like update your resume just so that once you go to university, it's not like you have to start everything over again. Because that's what I did, and it wasn't too good because by then I realized that I lost a lot of the contacts that I worked for, and I couldn't like use them as my references. So yeah, good to know. So here I'll talk about what is a cover letter. So a cover letter is a one-page letter to convince and persuade the employer that you are the ideal candidate for the position. So whatever you couldn't talk about on your resume, you're going to talk about in your cover letter. And here you can expand on the skills that are left out, or you want to explain more in your resume, in your from your resume in your cover letter. So you can always talk about, one of the big achievements that you made in your cover letter to really, demonstrate that you develop your skills over time. And then here you can also display how you can align with the company you're applying to, whether it's aligning with their values or like their developmental pathway. But be very careful because you only want to include the things that really sell you as a candidate. So it's only one page, and that's very strict, not like a resume where you can have 2 pages. Cover letters, you should only have one page because hiring managers, they don't have all day to look at all of these cover letters. They pretty much scan the first paragraph and then move on if they think you're a bad candidate or so here's what a cover letter looks like generally. You have your name and contact information at the top, and then sort of your letterhead, like who you're writing to. Ideally, it's the hiring manager. And then it's just like an intro paragraph explaining your experiences, one, two, three, and then an ending paragraph. So some notes are your header should match your resume header. So this kind of blocky thing at the top, you shouldn't have this because it it's not really like professional. You ideally would just take this block out and then have your name and like your contact info at the bottom in one line. And then you have to put the employer, hiring manager, contact info to demonstrate that you know like who you're applying to. And then this is optional, but you can put a hook paragraph demonstrating like your interest and your alignment to their company. And then you're going to have 2 to 3 key experiences relevant to that job that you're applying to. And then afterwards, you're going to summarize these 2 experiences and then reiterate your interest. So for the hook paragraph, um, it's really there because hiring managers go through so many letters a day. You have to make sure that yours kind of stand out from the rest. So here are some benefits. It's really just to capture the interest of the hiring manager. It makes your cover letter more impressionable and it demonstrates your alignment with the role. So there's a couple ways you can do this. The first one is to tell a creative story. Um, so about like, I watched this movie once and it inspired me, or I don't know, like I lived with my grandparents all my life and it inspired me to, I don't know, it's just tell a creative story is a way to do it. And then a second way is to express your passion, just simply stating like how passionate you are for making a difference. Granted, a lot of people use that as a hook, but if you find a way to make it interesting, then it can be impressionable. The third approach is to align with the company. So some companies, let's say, are women run. If you're applying as a woman, then you can sort of alleviate, like leverage that, and then use that in your hook paragraph to demonstrate your alignment. Okay, so remember these paragraphs, these key experiences, they are the meat of your hamburger. So we're going to look into how to create that. So in order to create an effective cover letter, the experiences that you write about need to be clear, concise, and relevant to job qualifications. To do this, you can follow the STAR format. So this STAR format is really useful for writing your experience paragraphs because it gives you a structure of how you can tell these stories in an effective way. The first one is situation. So you can state the situation that you were in that caused you to need to use certain skills. And then as an example, you can start off with as a project coordinator at X company, and then you can talk about your task. So I was tasked with leading a group of 20 new hires. You can, so you first you set off the situation and then you list what task you had and then you talk about the action that you took. So it would be something like to do this, I worked with my team to create a plan, things like that. And then you can talk about your result. So first off, you talk about context, and then you talk about the task that you had to tackle, and then how you tackled it, and then you talk about your result. So this is pretty self-explanatory. You can say things like how this impacted your company, how what you learned from this, and then the last part would be how you can relate this experience back to the job that you're applying for. So again, I have an example. Yeah, I don't think I have an example, but I think you can probably make inferences based off of these examples here. So the really important part is the last R. So relate. How can you relate what you gained from these experiences back to how you will apply them in your new job? Okay, so here are some do's and don'ts of cover letter writing. So the first thing you should do is to use keywords mentioned in the job posting. So things like if they need you to use Excel and you have experience doing that, you can leverage that in your cover letter. If you have customer service experience and they're looking for that, you can mention that in your cover letter as well. And then also something you should do is to address your letter to a specific person, to really sell that you're speaking to that person instead of just saying dear hiring manager or dear recruiter. You can demonstrate that you know who you're talking to and you've done the research. A bunch of different jobs, and then accidentally you use the wrong cover letter for that job. So this is something you should avoid by proofreading. And then something you should do is to mention the skills you possess in the job posting listed as required skills. So some jobs require you to know how to, let's say, use Python. You can put that in your skill section and then really highlight that in your cover letter. And then you can highlight what you can bring to the organization. So how can you be a good addition to the company? Some don'ts of cover letter writing. Don't be overly modest. Like, don't be humble. You're trying to market yourself. You're trying to sell your skills out there. But another thing is that you shouldn't lie about your skills or qualifications. I know it seems unlikely, but your hiring manager might know you in real life. And sometimes it can be like that. And if you lie about your skills or qualifications, that's like a big red flag and you will get disqualified almost immediately. Another thing to not do is to overly explain a skill or repeat yourself. You want it to be clear and concise so that there's no confusion. Another thing is for cover letters, you might write so many of them that like writing them from scratch each time is going to take so much time. So if you have these experience paragraphs already, you can just copy and paste them and then tailor it to the job accordingly. And that's pretty much it, the do's and don'ts of cover letter writing. If you guys have any questions, you can just post them in the chat and I'll answer them when I see them. Okay, so now we move on to what makes a good cover letter. So hiring managers don't have time to fully review each cover letter, so you have to make yours stand out somehow. The first big thing you can do is to focus on the 3 C's. So clarity, conciseness, and confidence. You want to demonstrate that you have good written communication, and being concise helps make your cover letter a really fast read for your hiring manager so that it's not overwhelming. And then confidence convinces them of your competence. So keep in mind that cover letters are often a supplemental to your resume, but it's a really great opportunity to demonstrate your personality and your attitude. So if it's for a job where you feel like you can add a bit of humor in it, that's something definitely that you should do in case that, that's what the hiring manager is looking for. Okay, so that's the end of cover letters. Hope you're all following along still. And then, so we're gonna move on to interview preparations soon. Do we have any questions or anything that you want me to go back and cover again? Okay. In that case, I'll move on to interview preparations. So, has anyone actually done an interview before? Curious. Okay. So it seems like no one has done an interview before. That's fine. Here's how you can nail an interview. So I have some tips. Interviews are often an employer's first impression of you, so you want to make sure to leverage this and make a good impression. Some general advice I have for you is to dress appropriately. So make sure you're in interview attire, not sweatpants, not a sweatshirt. And if it's an in-person interview, you want to make sure you give them a handshake and greet them before you sitting down. Before an interview, you should always research the company, their values, their projects, what they're working on, and their working environment, whether it's like a friendly or it's more of like a stern environment. And then another tip is to practice answers to challenging questions. So things like, what's your biggest weakness? What's something you still need to work on? If you had an argument with your employer, what would you do? Things like that. You should be prepared to have these questions come up on the actual interview. Again, interviews are actually pretty hard to prepare for because you never really know which questions the interviewer will ask you. But if you do practice with your peers, your parents, friends, doing mock interviews, they can really help you get over sort of that nervousness. So despite the unpredictability of interviews, questions asked by employers tend to group under broader themes that have different purposes. So I know we said that interviews are kind of unpredictable, but we can still categorize some of the interview questions into behavioral, situational, and open-ended questions. So here are some common types. For behavioral, it's asking you about something that you did in the past and how you behaved. So it usually goes off like, tell me about a time where you struggled to keep up. Like, what did you do and how did you adapt? Things like that. And for these questions, you want to use the STAR format. So situation, task, action, result, and how it relates to your new job that you're applying for. So this is really good because behavioral, right? You want to talk to them, give an example of a situation where you, I think, struggle to keep up, and then your task that you struggle to keep up with, how you did to overcome that, the result of your actions, and then how you can apply that to your new job. And then for another thing that you can use STAR for is a situational interview question. And this is really for an interviewer to assess what you would do in certain circumstances. So they want to know how you will react to certain situations that might come up during the workplace. So it might go along the something like, what would you do if a client was very upset about a product because it didn't meet their expectations? So it demonstrates your critical thinking skills, your ability to problem solve and plan ahead, and how you you might tackle problems in the workplace. So for that, you can also use the star format. So you can talk about the situation, what you would do, the result of that, and then how you could do that in the new workplace. And then, so those two are more common. There are some interview questions that are more open-ended. So they just kind of want you to talk about your strongest experiences. So what that might look like is they'll say, tell me about your project organization skills. And then that really kind of tailors to the working environment. So if you're going to apply for a project coordinator position, they might ask you that question and really see how much you know about the position. So for this, you can use PEC, which is point, example, conclusion. So the point would be what skill you are going to talk about, and then you can talk about an example and then give a conclusion. So for open-ended questions, you want to make a statement. So let's say I have really good communication skills because, and then expand. And then you can talk about, for example, in my job as customer service, I did this, this, that. And then in conclusion, like this will help me be really suitable for this job because, of my experiences. So it's pretty simple. There's only three parts. Because it's not situational or behavioral, you can really take it into your own hands and talk about what you want to make you seem like the best candidate. Okay, so those are general interview questions. Now this, now we'll talk about like the question that everyone will ask. So tell me about yourself is the first question to every interview. It's very easy to mess up and leave a bad impression if you don't do it right. So here's some tips and advice that I have. You want to make sure your introduction is really brief, ideally 30 seconds to a minute. And some things that you should include in your tell me about yourself is your name, your education level slash program, your past experiences, your current commitments, and future goals. So that would be name, education, past, present, future. So you can talk about past experiences, what skills you have, current commitments, whether it's academic or professional. And then you can talk about future goals. So like connect to how you want to be a part of the job or company as your future goal. And then in this section, you can also throw in a couple facts about the company that most people wouldn't know about to demonstrate that you did your research and leave a good first impression. This is also one of the big questions that you want to watch out for in an interview. Um, it's really for an employer to see whether you have self-awareness of your strengths and weaknesses. So hiring managers like to ask this question to see if you're self-aware. So what's your biggest weakness? You don't want to say I have no weaknesses because that just tells them that you're not self-aware. Everybody has weaknesses, so don't say that you have no weaknesses. Something that you should do is to acknowledge that and then turn your weakness into a strength. For this question, it's difficult because there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. I would say avoid saying time management as your biggest weakness because it's not something that you can just like fix right away. And even if you say like you use a planner, you use a calendar, it's really important for you to have good time management in a job, especially if it's like fast paced. So this is a big like turnoff for most employers. Um, I'd say it is okay to mention your personality traits, like saying that your biggest weakness is that you're a little bit shy or you're slow to warm up to. that's fine because there's nothing that you can really do to change that. It's just a part of you. Um, and it's not like unless you're applying for like a customer service job or a marketing job that requires you to be out there, then you should probably avoid saying that. But most of the time, if you mention personality traits, you'll get away with it. And then lastly, you should always mention how you've changed or you're trying to change in terms of your biggest weakness. So saying that, my biggest weakness is that I lose patience really quickly. And then you can turn that into saying, but I've been working on it, let's say you're applying to work with children, then you can say like, through my experiences, I've been working on, really understanding their perspective and where they're coming from, and mention how you've changed as a person since then. So some good answers that I've talked about is you can say that you're introverted, you're slow to warm up to, because again, there's nothing you can do about your personality to really change it in like a day or two. Another thing you can say is you have trouble saying no to people, like you want to help them out, you want to demonstrate your ability to kind of help others. And then another thing you can talk about is frustration when tasks are not being completed, um, or there's always a disconnect between people who are not on the same page. So these are good answers because there's always a flip side to it, like saying, I get frustrated when things aren't getting done because I really want to stay on top of things and keep up with all the tasks. So those are some good answers that you can pick. Um, but yeah. Another big interview question that hiring managers like to ask, can you tell me about a time you failed? So when answered incorrectly, this question can cost you greatly. Um, but if you answer it well, it can really impress your interviewer. Some advice I have for this is that don't say you can't remember. Like if they ask you that and you say, I can't remember the last time I failed, um, that is a really big red flag because then again, it's like you're not self-aware. Instead of saying that, you can say like, this is actually generally, this is general advice. If you don't know what to say to a question, you can say, that's a really good question. Like, I'll need some time to think about that one. Instead of like thinking about a random situation on the spot that doesn't really tailor to the question, it's fine to say like, can I have some time to think about that? That's a really good question. Um, just to buy yourself some time. And then another advice I have is to list academic failures rather than professional ones, because again, you're applying for a job. So if you list a problem, like if you tell them about a time that you failed academically, it doesn't necessarily translate to the workplace. So if you talk about an academic failure, it won't be so detrimental as like a time you failed during work. So that's a tip. And then my other tip is to always state your failure and what you learned from the experience. So it's okay to fail, but you should always talk about how you learned from that failure, you know? And it doesn't always have to be a true failure. Let's say you're like someone who's really good in school and then you got like high 90s always, and then you get like a 70. That's not a fail technically, but if you set a stage for the employer saying, I grew up in a really strict family, like grades, um, like the standards are really high, then they'll understand like where you're coming from and your perspective when you say you failed something. So don't be afraid to define your standards of a failure before like talking about that. So that you can kind of put the bar pretty high or low and then talk about how that affected you. So yeah, that's about it. We're approaching 3:50. So now it's Q&A time. I went through resumes, cover letters, and some interview tips. If you guys have any questions, you guys can ask them now in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay, so if no one has any more questions, that'll be the end of the session. I hope you guys found this workshop to be informative. If you have any questions that you forget to ask, you can always email me at my email address below. Now you can take a screenshot or copy this. You can always email me and I'm happy to answer any questions about, general university stuff, or interviews, cover letters, resumes, things like that. I know there was a lot of information to take in, but if you guys need anything, I will be available on my email. And yeah, thank you all for coming. And I'll say bye. I'll end the session here. Bye, guys.